There we go.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Well, class, welcome to my class. Sorry, or our class. Sorry for being having technical difficulties this morning. I won't use this laptop again in the future. What happened was that I'm using my laptop through my law firm, and what's happening with law firms, every law firm out there, is that they're greatly raising the security profile of their firms. They're major targets for hacking and other kinds of data theft. And so we're constantly upgrading the security on our laptops, which changes. And sometimes we don't always get notice that those changes occurred. For example, the USB ports are shut down on my laptop. They monitor everything that I send. And see, so just I have to be careful about what happens, and they're constantly changing that, and that is a definite trend that you guys should be aware of, and how you're going to interact in the future. And in the past, we would pride ourselves on getting around the security protocols, and the reality is, if you were to brag about getting around the security protocols at a modern firm nowadays, that it would be looked at very, very poorly. So lesson one, don't circumvent the security protocols, because that will definitely tick someone off. Okay, well, let me go ahead and get started here. I'll share my screen. Let me know. Can everyone see my screen? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, perfect. Thank you. The title of this slide is Your Digital World, and it corresponds with some of the questions that were asked in the first week's assignment around Instagram, what it takes to be successful, and all the things that you're kind of wondering about how an eDiscovery class is going to bring value to your career. Let me do a quick introduction. My name is Shannon Bales. I have a BS in criminology from the University of Oklahoma and a certificate in computer forensics from Cal State Fullerton. I'm the manager of litigation support at Munger, Tolles & Olson. I manage a team of 13. I'm a former managing director at FTI Consulting, and have about 20 years of big law experience working for the OC District Attorney, Latham & Watkins, Gibson, Munger. These are all big name firms. I'm the chair of the California Lawyers Association Law Practice Management and Technology Committee. It's a long, too long of a title. And I am an adjunct here at Santa Ana, UCLA, on trial and legal technology. I advise the UN war crimes tribunals in Rwanda, Cambodia, Syria, and Ukraine. And I'm the author of a book called The Trial Presentation Companion about legal technology use in the courtroom. Now, why are you here? You're trying to develop your career. You're trying to develop your career, and you're wondering, how are these technical skills going to help me? There's something called a paratechnical. It's not an official title at firms just yet, but a paratechnical is someone that bridges the gap between legal and technical proficiency. You perform the same tasks as a paralegal, but you're adept in the use of legal tech to accomplish those goals. And we're seeing, I'm what's called a litigation support. I'm the manager, but we have eDiscovery project managers, and I'll go a little bit into that in a moment. But the paratechnical really handles, or paralegal, handles a lot of those tasks that are technical in nature, the low-hanging fruit on the technical scale, so not data manipulation and things of that nature. But they're versed enough in technology to be able to handle some of the technology tasks on the case. And if you look at the profile of paralegals that come out of Santa Ana College in particular, that go to smaller firms and wind up often in bigger firms, you'll see that your expertise could be very valuable in making sure that firms make good decisions about technology choices, that your exposure here in this class and other classes that you might take can help you become a decision maker and kind of turbocharge your career to um, you know, bypass those that don't have technical skills. Um, this is a survey of from ESP Legal. They're a technical recruiter of salaries in eDiscovery. The specialist position at the bottom is the entry level, going up through project manager, coordinator, manager, and director. Usually these salaries are all, at least in California, all have an overtime component. I will tell you, at my firm, we range from the low 80s, but then that person gets a bonus and they do overtime. So I would expect them to make $110,000 to $120,000, $110,000 to $120,000 to the high. We blow this out of the water. We have project managers that make, well, we have one project manager that makes about $500,000 a year. He works a lot. I wouldn't want to work as much as he works, but you know, he's regularly making $400,000 to $500,000 between his salary, overtime, and bonus. So there's a lot of money that you can make in this area. I showed litigation support jobs here. There's so many different things that you can do with exposure to legal tech. And that's because you can do everything from sales to project management to being a paralegal with a paratechnical, or just being a paralegal that has great legal technology skills. But these jobs are in demand, especially on the lower end. There's a lot of entry level positions open, and you know, they really do enhance your career in a good way. Any questions about kind of the field of legal tech? It's called litigation support, paratechnical, paralegal. You know, the challenge in the industry really is right now um, uh, getting enough people with exposure to the process. And paralegals really are uniquely situated to be able to take advantage of these opportunities because you have exposure to the law. And so by having exposure to the law and the legal tech, you're able to help attorneys make good decisions about what to do in a case, or make those decisions on your own. And you know, when we're talking about legal technology, you know, it's about using common sense about the devices and ways that people work around you, right? We're going out and we're collecting all these different kinds of devices, and I'll get further into what collection means later. But we're basically getting the data off of each one of those computers, and we're doing it in a forensically sound manner so that it can be used in court and authenticated in court. And if we miss a step in the process, that can cause issues for our case. And I'll talk a little bit about spoliation a little bit. But when you're approaching these problems, you should be thinking about your real world use of how people will either use things in the way that they should, but also in the way that they shouldn't, right? And I'll give you an example. How many of you here in the classroom that are working have ever emailed a file home for you to work on later? If you've done that, you've opened your personal computer at home to being collected. You know, if there was a lawsuit with your company, and we see this all the time, and people get so angry because, you know, your personal computer has personal stuff on it, right? You might have, you know, the biggest thing that happens is people's bathing suit pictures from and kids pictures from vacation and things like that that they don't want other people seeing, for perfectly valid reasons. But by emailing those work files at home, you've kind of tainted your own personal bubble of protection, personal protection of your computer equipment. Same thing with your phone. If you're having work conversations on your phone becomes discoverable in a case. um, you know, we see a lot of people, um, we see a lot of, well, we're not hunting and we don't really care about what's going on in people's personal lives in a case. Man, some of these stories that we see on people's phones and home computers and things like that are juicier than anything you see on TV. So try to keep your digital personal life separate from your digital work life. And you'll find that a lot of the disputes that you're involved in, people have not kept those things separate. Everything, it goes to the top. It's CEOs who haven't kept their digital lives separate, and having to navigate that process is a delicate one, and you have to use all your interpersonal skills, all your customer service skills to get the data that you need to get. Now, a lot of the technology that we're going to be talking about, and the way that we and the source of all information, basically, of how we do things, comes from the industry definitions. Comes from a model called the eDRM, or Electronic Discovery Reference Model. And you can check it out for yourself at edrm.net. But basically, this is a model of what occurs in the eDiscovery process. And we're going to be going in detail over each one of these phases that you see here. To the left, the big circle is called information governance. That's policies and process at companies for how they deal with data. And these policies, how they treat data, can really have a tremendous effect on the costs of litigation. I'll tell you a story. One of the biggest eye openers for me was happened very early in my career, where I went to a client's office, and it was a big drug company, and I had to go to the general counsel's office for that drug company and help him with some technical thing. So I went, and I had to look at his email while I was doing this. And all this big company had, were emails from every big law firm in town where he was sending cases. You couldn't imagine the volume of litigation and lawsuits that these big companies are involved in. And they tend to use outside counsel, these big law firms, to handle things like investigations, internal investigations, times when they're sued, when they're suing somebody else. And so seeing all of these different things, all these different law firms kind of service at the cost of millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, was a really big eye opener for me. And companies that have an information governance policy can save themselves millions of dollars every year because they don't have data just lying around. You'll find later in our course that a lot of how our processes and procedures are priced, how it's charged for, is not only through the billable hour, but also through per gigabyte charges. So how many files they have, what's the volume of them, and this information governance policy is what allows companies to delete data when it gets old, move it into storage, have it organized, make sure it's secure, that private data remains private. And even big companies today, there's so many big companies that don't have very good information governance, and the cost of their lawsuits just skyrockets because the volume equals cost. And we're going through when we're going through the EDRM, you'll notice that there's a beige triangle at the lower left. When you start a case, you have high volume, and your goal is to lower that volume of information and raise the amount of relevance. So, you start with reams of information, everything from people's Girl Scout cookie orders to, the football pool to the relevant emails and a heck of a lot of irrelevant emails. And you're trying to work through processes and procedures and workflows that lower that volume of information through this model that you see here, and raise the amount of relevance that's in your data population. So you're cutting stuff out as you go, and you're making things more relevant. And so you have your grouping of documents that turn into exhibits, and that's how you get to trial. We'll again be going into detail on the eDRM, but suffice it to say, we start with identifying those documents that are important in a case, telling people to hold on to them. We're going to have someone come and talk to us about legal hold, collecting them, gathering those documents together to be used in a database. They're processed into a database where it's reviewed by attorneys and paralegals and document reviewers. We analyze it, we produce it, and we present it at trial. We'll be going through each one of these throughout the class, so don't worry if you don't know what these mean just yet. So metadata. One of our first questions was metadata. Metadata is the hidden data embedded in electronic documents, emails, images, and other digital files. So it includes all kinds of information, like author, who authored a document, what was the creation date, how was it modified over time, the properties of that document, literally hundreds of fields of information. Now, when I say fields of information, if you think about a database, we're going to put all that information into a database, and each one of the different areas of information from date to author to subject are all separated into different fields of information so that we can search it and make those cuts to get to the relevant documents. We often call metadata data about data, right? Because we have an electronic file and we're learning about what puts that electronic file together. So if you look here, I have the properties from a Word document and I think a PDF. And if you look at these, here, let me zoom in on some of it. If you look, you're seeing different properties of the document, the size, how many pages, any tags, what company. I work for Munger, Tolles & Olson. Dates, when was it created? When was it printed? Who was the author? Who was the last person that modified it? And over here from the PDF, what location was it stored in? What version of the software? When was it created? When was it modified? And all sorts of other information about the authorship of this document. Now, these details could be very important in a lawsuit and also allow us to search. Are we only worried about documents created in March 1st, in the month of March in 2023? Okay, well, we would, between March 1st, 2023 and April 25th, 2023, well, this document was created in 2025, so it wouldn't be relevant for our case. Maybe we're only worried about documents created by me, Shannon Bales. Yeah. Maybe we're doing an investigation and we're trying to, and we collect a bunch of documents from a company that hired some employees from the company suing them, And we're looking at the documents and we show that the path or the company or the author are all listed from the previous company. That would show that they stole a bunch of information from the previous company, a bunch of intellectual property. So the metadata really is the breadcrumbs that tell us the story of what happened in the case. And so you always need to be considerate or consider what your actions will do with the metadata, because it could lead to something called spoliation, which I'll discuss in a moment. So I'm going to demonstrate really quick, looking at some metadata. Give me 1 second to set this up.
So, and I bet someone will be there. Why don't you go over the children and demographic, okay? And then the other thing is if anybody has
1 moment.
or they're at risk of negative, law enforcement interaction, they have most of the having talked to them. And then someone will be there. Are you aware of that before?
Okay, so I'm going to open up a document really quick. Okay, here's a folder. Right now it doesn't contain anything. And I'm going to first demonstrate on a Word document. My Word's opening up, sorry.
Would you do me a favor and help my right here, turn up on it, we have 3 clients.
So actually, first I'll do it with an email. So I'm dragging an email over here to this folder, and I've copied that folder file over to the folder. If I were to open this email, actually, let me find a little bit older email. This will illustrate it better. Okay, here we go. Okay, here's an email that was sent on Friday, 2/21 at 2:04 p.m. And what I did is I just did what many attorneys and paralegals do, is I dragged the file over to a folder and for purposes of us collecting it for a lawsuit, let's say. Now, you saw the date of the email. Hold on, let me open it again. Friday, 2/21/2025. That's the send time. And there's multiple date and time fields, by the way. But if I view the details by just copying this over, details, you'll see that the date now for the date that it was modified is 2/22/2025. It's the time that I just copied this over. Okay. And that could be considered the modification of the metadata in that document. And second, and that's a problem, right? If the time and dates don't match the time and dates of the email, or that's changed somehow by you improperly collecting the email, that can lead to something called spoliation, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's a common error that happens all the time, and it changes the metadata about the email. And when you do that, you really make unnecessary risk to your case. As a matter of fact, it can just cause tremendous issues for your case. Here's a document. If I go to File, Info, you'll see those metadata fields. And you can see, who actually made this document. Winona Lozada. I don't know who, this is some document sent to me by a company, but that's who the author is. And I was the last person that changed it. So you can see the breadcrumbs on this Word document that say who made it and who changed it and when, right? This document was created May 9th, 2024. It was last modified May 10th, 2024. I haven't changed it since that day I initially received it. But these are the kinds of breadcrumbs that we see when we're putting these records into a database so that we can find the information that's needed. So the metadata becomes very, very important. Hey, how are you? The metadata becomes very, very important in everything that we do. And we typically use forensically sound methods typically to collect data. There's special tools out there in the industry. You see it on the spy shows and the police shows where they're collecting data. And there are things that we use like write blockers that prevent the changing of metadata and specialized software to collect files in bigger cases. That software is trickling down to smaller cases. It still becomes very important to preserve that metadata, even to make attempts to do that. We'll talk about at some point in this class, some methods for collecting metadata that you can kind of try on your own. And along the way, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask.
So sometimes when
Yes.
it's possible that law enforcement will.
So metadata scrubber. So this can be a good or a bad thing, right? A metadata scrubber is software that removes all the hidden metadata from digital files. Now you saw all that tracking information. There's metadata related to the case, and then there's metadata related to your investigation of whatever it is that you're working on, right? You wouldn't want to leave a clues to the law firm that you're up against that you did something, what you're doing with your cases. Imagine for a second that you're doing a document review where you've been asked to put files into folders marked hot, relevant, or not, or cold, right? The documents that are hot are the best documents for your case. Documents that are not all that good. And the cold ones are not really great for you either. And imagine for a second that you put those documents together and you send them to the other side, and they go through and they review the metadata on it, and it says which documents are hot, which documents are not, and you basically made their job a lot easier by telling them what documents you're going to use at trial, right? Or are important to your case. So we use metadata scrubbers when we're doing things like productions and sending data over to the other side. You may not want the other side to see who your expert is that wrote a report about the case. You might not want them to know how much time you spent on it or when it was created. There's all kinds of information that you want to remove using a metadata scrubber when you're doing that. Now, you also, in other legal contexts, don't want to get caught using a metadata scrubber because you're hiding information, you're spoiling the data. So the metadata scrubber is used in certain situations and not in others. If you have questions about that, we'll ask. We'll be answering that later. When I send documents out even internally to my firm, and I often use a metadata scrubber just because it might have my personal information in it, and I want to remove that. And really, we want to make sure that we're sending the fielded metadata when we're, and that there's no confusion over what metadata is being sent when we send it to the other side, right? We don't want to send, we want to send those documents as, there's a lot around this that we'll talk about later, but basically we're wanting to send the documents with the metadata the metadata that was contained within them at the time of collection, right? Now, spoliation. Spoliation is a concept where if you allow the data to be destroyed or the metadata to be destroyed, either through negligence or a lot of the time it's on purpose. But if you just get caught doing that, there's severe penalties for destroying the metadata, because the metadata, again, it's the story of the case, and all kinds of things can happen. You can get a directed judgment and lose immediately because you got caught destroying metadata. You can get an adverse inference in court. In other words, the court will instruct the jury that they must think a certain way about a topic rather than them being able to interpret it for themselves. There's money fines. You might have to go back and recollect all the data that you previously collected. All kinds of different things can happen to you when you don't treat the documents properly. And again, it doesn't have to be you don't necessarily have to be have ill will towards something to get spoliation. I'll tell you in a case that I was in that resulted in millions of dollars of costs and fines and everything else, and had no bad intent whatsoever. I'm going to go back a little bit in my slides to eDRO, just to kind of show this. So when a lawsuit starts, we identify who the appropriate parties are and which documents we may want, and they send a preservation letter, that little blue box right here, so that we can collect them. So once you're under that preservation or legal hold, and we'll be talking about legal hold probably next week, once you're under that legal hold letter, you're not allowed to destroy any documents. And if you think about big organizations and how the right hand may not know what the left hand is doing, you can start to think, that big problems can occur. And I'm going to tell you about one here. What happened was this big computer chip company got sued, and they were under a duty to preserve the documents of everyone on their team. So think about how that is related. A letter goes from one law firm to the law firm of the other company. It goes to maybe the general counsel of that big company, and they send an email around. There's electronic ways of doing this now as well, but that's automated, so people don't get in trouble with this. But they send that letter around, and oftentimes people are just on their own to not tamper with or destroy the documents. Well, what if that email doesn't get to everyone? It's actually very common. And in the case that I was involved in, it didn't get to the manager of manager of one of the departments. And the manager who did not receive this notice sent around an email saying, because people's desks were dirty and things like that, pizza and paper shredding party. Pizza and paper shredding party. So let me pause right there. Imagine you're a juror on a case and you're wanting to look at the facts of the case, and you hear and see an exhibit at court that says pizza and paper shredding party. Your immediate thought is that something bad is going on here, right? No one will believe that this was all by accident. Everyone expects these big companies to work perfectly. And that might be true. Maybe they should. But the message never got to the team. They had no bad intent here. They had to go to great lengths to show what was destroyed, why they got fined, they got negative inferences in court. And every single time this company was sued, every single time, they'd bring out this email and say the very first thing, and every judge would just look at them negatively. Every decision maker, like jurors, would look at them negatively. And it was the email that likely unfairly was the reason why the negative decisions for our client came down. And so you just have to be so careful about these policies and procedures and making sure, and there's some technical ways, there's technology out there now that will help in this identification, preservation, collection process. And that goes to what we talked about before, InfoGov. What is your information governance policy around data destruction? What are the rules for your job in destroying documents or storing them? What are the rules at your company for when a lawsuit happens and making sure that data is preserved? So there's a lot around InfoGov. And as a matter of fact, information governance is probably one of the areas that paratechnicals, paralegals can really do some fantastic things in. So, a lot of risk as we described about metadata and legal documents and accidental disclosure, tampering and authenticity issues, version control issues. So the point is, be very careful when you are asked to collect or gather documents together. We're going to be talking more about this under collections and forensics because it can just cause a lot of issues that you may not have intended. Now, I'm going to stop for a second and talk about an issue in legal tech that I'm sure you're going to be aware of, kind of the technical that I'm going to talk about here. But we have something called modern attachments, and modern attachments are also called hyperlinked files. Maybe 5 years ago, when you sent a picture you send a picture to family or friends, or a file or something, to your bank, or whoever, you typically would attach that file to an email and send it, right? So when they received the email, you would have the email and the attachment. More often than not, and that was actually very good for legal purposes, because you had in your hand the email, which is, we'll talk about this later, is called the parent, and the attachment, which is called the child. And it's very clear what version, because you have it right in the email, of that document was sent, and you have everything right there. With hyperlinked files, also called modern attachments, you're sending a link to something, right? You're sending a hyperlink to a document that might be on a network. You're sending a hyperlink to a file or website. And between the time you send it and the time that you get sued, that file can change and go through multiple versions of change at wherever it's linked to. It can be moved. All sorts of things can happen. So a modern attachment is a linked file to a network storage location, like Dropbox, OneDrive, SharePoint, you name it. It allows you to collaborate, right? They're very beneficial because we can work on these types of files together simultaneously, right? And, you know, it does prevent some version conflicts, but it allows us all to kind of work together on the same document. And because it's always live, you know, you have that link to that live file. It can it can change constantly, and this becomes an issue at court because you are wanting to show what happened contemporaneously over time, and you may not have that version anymore in a modern attachments. So you know, there's some benefits too, because you can track, you know, who had access, who made changes, some other information, but it can be very, very problematic for us to put those records into a database. And I'll talk more about this in a second. So here's a chart that says the differences between traditional versus modern attachments. Again, the major difference being that you embed that file directly into the email rather than a link, right? And that the issue is that you will see the file as it existed when it was sent, when it's attached, right? And when it's embedded in the email versus seeing a link that could have changed multiple times over time. This actually creates really big issues of collection for us, because when we collect an email with an embedded file, it's all there, right? But if we collect a file, let's think about you know, how that might present an issue for doing things. And if you're collecting that file from the hyperlink file, it means that you need to, instead of exporting a mailbox or doing something like that, it means that you need to get into that network shared location, which is very, you know, companies don't want to open up their network to you, right? And so you need to be able to get into that network shared location and then find the document and go back in version history to find the version and connect it to the email as it was sent at that time. And all of that is a very manual process at this time. With all the technology that we have out there, we're starting to see some solutions here and there, but with all the technology that's out there, we're really not seeing a good solution for modern attachments, and it means just a ton of manual work. So I wanted you to think about how that might affect you and the costs for your client. If you just out of hand were to say, yeah, we'll send you all the files and the attachments, no problem. You're going to obligate yourself to go through the network and find that file and, you know, in a forensically sound manner, copy and get that file onto some media that it can be, you know, put into a database and sent over to the other side. You know, not a big deal if you're talking about 5 documents or 10 documents, but can you imagine doing that for millions of documents? Unsophisticated people of all levels, lawyers included, have obligated themselves to providing that level of collection on cases, not knowing that it's going to end up taking hundreds, if not thousands of hours, and potentially tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to comply with the rules that they made for themselves. And the courts don't release it. There is a bit of a mix on how courts treat modern attachments. And most courts don't consider it an attachment, right? So that's why we don't call it an attachment all the time. We call it a hyperlinked file sometimes. So courts are not necessarily treating modern attachments, hyperlinked files, as an attachment. I think over time, as the technology changes, that you'll see courts come back around to treating it like a true attachment. But for right now, most courts do not treat them as a strict attachment to a file, the way the embedded attachment, like you send your pictures to friends and things like that, is. Any questions about modern attachments? Are there any questions about what I've spoken about so far?
Are the slides going to be made available?
Yes, I will PDF and
Okay,
post the slides.
thank you.
This says stop, but we're not going to stop. I was going to actually say discuss. Are there any of these?
Question.
Sure.
Yeah, so I serve certain files and I send links. So is that like a proper way of serving them records if something were to happen to those records?
Well, it depends on the rules of the court and how you do you mean you produce the records via a link?
Yeah, sometimes we have to provide medical records, or actually the clients file to different attorneys' offices.
Yes.
Sometimes we'll do like a PDF link to forward those.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to your specific case, but what I can say is that what you're talking about is probably on the forensic, still before that the records have been produced. You're talking about just collecting at that point, right? You're providing the medical records.
Yeah.
The law firm is probably going to take those medical records, depending on how big the case is. Let's assume they're putting it into a database, right? So it'll be scanned or electronically converted to a record format, which we'll talk about later. So your concern should be about the preservation of metadata. I'm not really all that concerned about, we FTP documents all the time and we receive documents all the time. What you don't want to do is, one really bad process is if you ask your client to just take their emails and copy and paste it into their own emails. You get the metadata issues that I showed you before, where that changes the metadata. You get you end up having to pull emails out of emails, and it does a lot with what we call the parent-child relationship. Again, the parent would be the email, the child are all the things that attach the email. And so I don't think per se that there's a problem with sending medical records via a link.
Okay. Just
It would be interesting to see if your link preserves the metadata, or if it's necessary in the type of records that you're providing. But someone savvy one of these days will come back and say, I need the metadata from these files. Did you collect it properly? Did you authenticate it? So that it can be authenticated in court. And you might, it could be a problem someday, right? So just something to think about.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So metadata and eDiscovery and litigation. Metadata is often requested as part of eDiscovery, requiring proper handling, collection, and preservation. We'll talk a little bit about that later. The metadata, as we spoke about, helps track document history, ensures evidence authentication. We're going to go over form of production at some point. A lot of times we're asked to send what's called a native file. The native file is as it was when it was collected. Because we also do what's called an image production, where we convert the file to an image and give people a database record. I'll show how that works later. Both have pluses and minuses, but we'll talk about that at some point in the future. It becomes very important to maintain what's called chain of custody throughout the process, and that's knowing who handled the evidence and where it went from a step by step. So I think it was Jose Carlos that asked the question before. In our world, we'd want to know who got those medical records, who you sent them to, and what that person did with them once they had them, right? And what was their workflow process after that? So did they take it and then send it to a vendor who then put it into a database? What is the chain of custody so that everything remains authenticated? And as part of that, what is the documentation around the chain of custody? Do you keep it secure? For example, we have an evidence locker and we lock things up so that people can't just walk with a hard drive full of information. As you can imagine, when you're working at a law firm, you could be working on all kinds of sensitive issues. Our firm worked on the Kobe Bryant death photos case where the police department were bragging about having seen Kobe Bryant's body, right? And they took pictures and they were sharing them amongst themselves. When we received those photos for evidentiary purposes, they were locked up so tight I can't even tell you. If you did not, and we monitored that, right? If you who had access, who could do it, and it's the same whether it's the Kobe Bryant case or a lawsuit. How do you make sure that there's no unauthorized tampering? How do you get it from? How do you log the data going from point A to point B, right? Who handled it? Because a good lawyer is going to turn around and say, if there's holes in your chain of custody, that the evidence was tampered with and it's not authentic, right? So that helps with authentication, which is the last bullet point. A well-maintained chain of custody supports the evidence's credibility by demonstrating that it has remained unchanged since collection. Any breaks or gaps in this chain can raise questions about the evidence's reliability and may lead to challenges in court. And my last slide here, the importance in legal proceedings. Again, it maintains integrity, prevents tampering, and makes it admissible. All the things that you want out of chain of custody. If you look at a theme for this slide deck, it's all about understanding what metadata, what metadata is, how it needs to be treated with the appropriate levels of attention from paralegals and everyone on the legal team, or else that metadata can be tampered with. It can lead to spoliation. And the proper handling of evidence is important so that you maintain chain of custody and that it gets to where it needs to get, and so that it can be authenticated in court. Metadata is the foundation for almost everything we do in eDiscovery. It's what goes into the records in the database that you use to search and make good decisions about which documents are going to be used at trial, what's going to be produced to the other side. It becomes the big cut in a case when you have a sea of junk in a database about how you're going to take a look at the data by being able to search for date or author or keywords or concepts, or using higher levels of technology like AI to find documents that are relevant in a database. All of these revolve around the metadata in your case and are the foundations of you doing a great job for the law firms or lawyers that you're working with. Let's see. So we did about any questions around metadata that I could answer? Let me stop sharing my screen. Oh, and I see there's some chat too. I just gave them your strategy. Yeah, so any questions before we move along?
Would you suggest using something like Dropbox versus doing a attachment of like a PDF to swap with the other party to avoid any
Yes.
issues?
Well, so it's all how it's done in the transfer. Um, we use FTP and Dropbox to send files all the time. In a later class, we'll be talking about, form of production, and we'll be talking about how we send files over. When we put the documents in the database, if we've done our job right, all that data is going to be fielded into a database. And so when we send them the database fields of information and either the images or native file, sometimes both, sometimes a combination. But because we did the right thing with the metadata at the beginning, we just send them a copy of the database, basically. And I'll show you how that works later. But we send a copy of the database, and so that we're not altogether worried about, because it's been preserved, right, in a database record, that it's not that we're not as worried about tampering. We we use Box and FTP to transfer files. I like that because it often leaves a good record of who accessed it, and it's secure, and you can shut off access if you need to.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Now, are you all students, or, I mean, I know you're all students, but are you all students that are working, or are you currently working in law? Can I get kind of an idea real quick what you're doing and what your background is?
I'm actually at work right now and I work at a law firm. So I'm
Hey,
trying to do
So do you
everything
have a
at once.
trial? Do you have a trial coming up?
We don't. We have a case where we have 6 motions going on, to next week, and we're trying to, jam them up because the last hearing the judge pretty much nailed them, so we kind of have them cornered, but
Yes.
yeah.
Well, I told you about that person at the beginning who makes $500,000 a year. It's a lot of money, and people go, wow, I want to make $500,000 a year. No, you don't. No one wants to make $500,000 a year when you have no evenings, no weekends, no nothing. And that guy worked his tail off. But you can still have a really good life and work some weekends and some OT and do pretty well for yourself in this industry. But good luck on your weekend work and doing double duty. That's real efficiency you got going on there, Myra. Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of I have to, because I was debating whether to stay on the class or not when I saw I thought Saturdays were mandatory. So
No.
I'm juggling 18 units right now and, everything, and it's crazy. So I was like, oh, I really want to take this class, but if I could just drop in when I can, that'd be.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm gonna generally get here 9-ish. Let's call it 9. I'll commit to 9. 9 on Saturdays. If people want to come, that's fine. Megan's here with me over here. Here, I'll quickly sit. Wait, Megan. Wait, there you are. Okay. But if you want to come and us talk about these kinds of issues, that's fine. But the recordings are good. I think the key to the class is just, I'm not going to release the entirety of the class at one time, but it's just keeping up. It's a little silly when I've seen people come to every single class, but they don't do the discussion board. How easy is discussion board, guys? Do the discussion boards, do all the little comments that you have to do, and that's how you end up with a good grade, just being consistent. There's no gotchas in this class. If you have questions about an assignment, you want to set a time with me, or you want to come in on a Saturday or whatever it is and talk about whatever it is that we're working on, I will help you, right? I will tell you, the things you need to know and help you get across the line in a good way. But just, stay consistent, put do those message board postings, do the quizzes, the Quizlets and all of that kind of thing. I am very in tune with, as a person with 3 daughters and married and all that, I'm very in tune with people having to work and having lives. For what it's worth, I don't care, if you have kids and things like that, and they want to come in and wave at the camera or whatever it is, I don't care. If you want to eat because you worked all day or you don't get a chance, you're at work and you need to eat a sandwich, by all means, eat your sandwich. Do whatever it is that you have to do. But you're welcome to be here live. You don't have to turn on your camera. If you want to have your camera on, that's great. I appreciate the interaction. Do check in with a question or two every now and then, just to help the flow of the class, save me from myself and having to talk for hours straight without a break.
One other question. So I looked at the course, but I don't see any due date. And
Yeah, I'm fixing those due dates.
Okay, because I,
But-
like I work because I'm already working in the field, I work with due dates. So
Yeah. I'll get those due dates squared away shortly, and I'll have the modules 3 and 4 in there, contemporaneous with those dates too.
And when is the assignment, the creating a plan due?
Creating a plan. Let me see.
I don't think it has a due date. I mean, that's where I'm at. I did all the discussions, but I think I just.
Give me a second here. That's the assignment 2 eDiscovery plan.
I believe so, yeah. The
Yeah,
first assignment.
I'll get that date in there by Sunday. But we're not even in. We're just at the end of module 1. I think each module takes about 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. I thought I was behind, but apparently I'm ahead. Okay, thank you.
You're probably ahead. So, and I appreciate your emails, and I'm happy to set up calls, whatever people need. Any other questions before we break for the day?
Yeah, I had a question. Like,
Sure.
you were talking that how will you go upon trying to look for a job or search or getting some experience in eDiscovery? I'm currently working at a law firm doing workers' comp, and um and eDiscovery intrigued me, but again, I just want to know, how do I get experience? Where do I start? Because again, this is a new field in law, so I'm a little lost when it comes to that.
It's not completely new. Okay, so I've been doing this for about 20 years, over 20 years.
Oh, okay.
So I did not have gray hair when I started this, and I did not have any kids. So now I have twin 12-year-olds and a 17-year-old, all that came after my career. So it's somewhat established, but there's still a lot of new ground that you can break. And because it's technology, it's always changing. Look at Gen AI, and Gen AI is going to have this huge impact on the law. And we're all kind of starting at ground zero with that and learning as we go. So there's so much where you can make a name for yourself. Getting your foot in the door is probably one of the hardest challenges of any job, any place, wherever you're trying to get a job. For me, I took an unexpected path into my entire career, which I'll probably go into maybe in the next session. But some of it's luck, and a lot of it is your flexibility and willingness to work. Workman's comp isn't a field that traditionally has a lot of e-discovery in it. There's ways I think that you can use other technologies that are kind of within litigation support that might help workman's comp and gets you going in that direction, but it's not typically a big e-discovery field. Again, I don't want to discourage you. There's other, I think, legal tech, project management and how you document things and your flexibility with databases. And there's a number of ways that you can have a profound impact on working at a workman's comp law firm. But if you're trying to gear your career to e-discovery or litigation, for example, you may want to start positioning yourself at that type of firm. Are you not getting attention from big law firms like Gibson and Latham that are here in Orange County? Then maybe you need to start at a smaller to mid-sized firm and make your way and be motivated in a positive way. I'll tell a story, two stories actually. So story one, I had a guy who wanted to do trials with me. He wanted to do the technology piece of trial, and I really liked him. I just thought he's a fantastic guy. I loved working with him. We're still friends to this day. This is about 15 years ago or so, and he constantly said, "Hey, I want to do trials. I want to do trials. I want to do trials with you. I want to learn how to do that." And we don't have just like a pile of trials waiting around that we can pass out. So when a trial opportunity came, I trained him, and I trained him when there was no trial around, but trained him, and he did everything kind of perfectly, right? Like, he didn't demand that I give him a trial today, and he did his work and he learned, and then he waited for his opportunity. Now, you can be endlessly waiting for an opportunity, right? You got to make that opportunity and remind people along the way that, hey, you're here. You'll do whatever it takes to get to help out, and that you're going to be, whatever you need. I'm the person for you. That's what ended up getting me to the UN in Rwanda. I was really interested in taking part at the War Crimes Tribunal, but that was a 3 to 4 year process before, the opportunity came around. And every single time that I saw the person that had that opportunity, I would remind them, "Hey, I would love to go and work at the tribunal in Rwanda." It was actually in Tanzania, but at the Tanzania tribunal for Rwanda. And I reminded him every time, "Hey, I'm available. I will do this. I will do whatever it takes. You let me know and I'll be your person." And I finally got my opportunity and I nailed it. I'm being very modest here. I nailed it. And then I got invited to every tribunal that came up, right? So really, it's just a matter of you getting lucky and taking on those opportunities when you can. If where you're at isn't going to give you the opportunity that you want, then you need to kind of think about, career decisions. Like, where do you need to be to make those opportunities happen? And if you need to be at a bigger firm, or at a firm, that does trials or whatever it is, then you need to position your career. And what most people aren't ready to do is, take that step backwards that could potentially happen to get in the door at, a litigation firm. So in other words, you're really well known for workman's comp. You probably could have stay within that specialization and do fantastic. But if what you're really wanting to do is eDiscovery and trials or whatever it is, you need to get your foot in the door and establish a reputation for those things. The other story I'll tell you, it's very similar to the first one, except when the opportunity came around, this person who had asked me to do trials for years, when the opportunity came around, they rejected the opportunity. They said, "I want to do trials, but I don't want to do this trial." And that completely turned me off from ever giving them an opportunity again to do that. So it's kind of like, be careful what you wish for. You take the opportunities that you're given, and you rise or fail from them. And I'll say one last thing. All of you here are starting your careers, or in your career and trying to improve. I'm constantly trying to improve my career. And I'll say being motivated, positive, and a good teammate are the characteristics that are differentiators for me when I'm interviewing people for entry-level jobs, that have allowed people with less experience and less ability to get that opportunity at our law firm over people that are more experienced. It was all attitude, all positive, all all just wanting to, telling that being able to tell that the person was hungry and wanted this opportunity and would kill it. And that's the way you want to portray yourself in interviews. That's the way you want to portray yourself in your career. As the person that's a manager of the department and has, I've given speeches at the White House on eDiscovery, all those things. And I'll still, if I'm at the trial site, I'll pick up people's laundry. I'll go empty the trash. I'll go get the pizza for everyone if they want a pizza. Who wants a Starbucks, that kind of thing. I don't, I don't put, nothing's really beneath me in terms of work ethic. And the only person I'm competing against when I go do a task is myself, because I'm doing it selfishly for me to show myself that I can do a good job and that I'm out there able to have pride in the work that I do. And a lot of people, they go, well, I'm not getting paid enough, or I'm not, getting recognized enough. And a lot of times those things are wrapped up into bad attitudes and people that really can't make it to the next level. Other questions?
So I'm actually now thinking of taking the paying for the AC.
He said,
Yeah. To take the exam, it's about $2,000. Would you recommend it?
ooh, it's $2,000.
Yeah, I think it's $2,000.
Yikes. I was on the ACEDS board. I think ACEDS is a wonderful organization. We're going to actually team up with them here. I think in a world where you have lots of opportunities and that you're in are you going to do the 4-year bachelor's?
I applied for it.
Okay.
So
yeah. I would say that blows ACEDS out of the water in terms of, being able to do it. I think there's all kinds of certifications out there that you could probably get that are free or low cost. I don't know that I would spend. I don't know that I would spend $2,000.
yeah, I wanted to get an opinion from somebody that was in the field, to see if they would suggest it or not, because it is, like an investment, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I go through that myself, and with education opportunities, and I don't want to tell you not to do it. If you're making all that weekend overtime and you want to blow some of it on, on a certification, something like that, it certainly doesn't hurt you. I'm just trying to think, and it is a decent differentiator. I would say I would probably do it if it was under $500. I probably wouldn't do it at $2,000 for myself.
Now, would you say if you're in a job application, does it have an edge that you have the certificate or not? Or
yeah, I think at times it does. I think it can be a door opener for you. I think it has value. I guess I can't really give you an opinion on the value of it. If you asked me and didn't tell me the cost, I'd say absolutely yes. If you told me it was $2,000, I am probably on the fence about that. I think there's probably, I think I would outline in your resume, hey, I took the eDiscovery 101 course at Santa Ana College and I got an A, right?
Okay. Yeah, I was because I think I'm working backwards where, I've been in the field 10 years and now I'm doing my education, to, get all the certifications and everything. But I was is it worth it? I know Professor Smith has suggested it, but when I looked it up, I'm $2,000. I was wondering.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
I didn't put on my own bio at the beginning when I got my degree at University of Oklahoma. I got it in 2013. That's only 11 years ago. And as you can tell, I've probably been out of college for a long time. It took me forever to get my bachelor's degree. and I'm glad I did it. It's an accomplishment I'm really proud of. It took me a long time. I struggled with it. I was not a straight A student or anything like that. But I mean, I personally, I think certifications are helpful. I think there's probably, over the life of this course, you'll probably hear about a certification or two that is lower cost and potentially just as impactful.
Are
I
there
know
any?
that
Good.
in the sorry, the Legal Tech Society there is a eDiscovery certificate or something like that, but it's under $200. Is that a good one?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know which one that is. If you want to show it to me or send me a link, I'm happy to take a look at it. But I would say, you know, the value, so the value in the ACED certification is in the networking, really. So getting out there and networking with people, I would say there's more value in joining ACEDs and then showing up at whatever event they have, right? And networking in a positive way and shaking everyone's hand in the room, I think gets you, you know, probably further ahead than some of those other things. I think you know, even though everyone here lives in Orange County, there's not really a thriving OC legal tech scene. We're going to change that though. We're going to have that great conference on April 12th. But you know, showing up at some of the events in Los Angeles or San Diego, or taking part in some of the paralegal association stuff. You know, I think that those things, that networking, showing up at the events, and you know, learning to work the room, and meet people, and you know, it's okay to say, hey, just want to introduce myself, talk for 2 minutes, and then get out of the conversation and go talk to someone else, right? I've actually seen a lot of great TikToks recently about, you know, networking and you know, having a conversations, and I plan on employing some of those in the next conference I go to. So learning to have that convo, shake someone's hand, look them in the eye, build the relationship, following up with a LinkedIn request, to link up. That's how you're going to build your network, and that's how you're going to you know, get more well known, and build the relationships that are necessary for you to get that next job.
Thank you.
That's my thought. Next week, I'm bringing someone named Joy Morale, and we'll talk a lot about potentially career development there. And also, yeah, she's going to talk about legal hold, but I'll make a point of us talking about career development and ideas. And I'm interested to see what she'd be a good one also to bounce with. What does she think about the certifications and all of that as well? Jose, I saw that you were going to say something.
Oh no, just my question was if there was any certifications that you would recommend or worth taking.
Yes. So there's not a course that preps yet for relativity certification. I think relativity is the gold standard for document review tools. It's a very hard certification to pass but there are a number of lower level certifications that you can go through, and you know, it shows definitely interest in eDiscovery, and they're free or low cost to get. There's some by Reveal and other software companies that I'll see if I can make a relationship with, so you guys can pursue that if interested. But
Like again, I'm just trying to get more understanding, more feel, because I do want to change my career into that. Because like again, I'm going back to school again. Like her, I have close to like 10 years experience in workers' comp doing various things. So I do want to change new direction because I kind of feel kind of stagnant. So that's one of the routes that I feel I want to take.
Well, we're trying to get some recruiters to our event on April 12th, and coaches, career coaches who can help give you some direction on doing that in a short amount of time.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, with that, we're done for the day. I hope you get to enjoy the rest of your weekend. It's been great meeting all of you. Sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning. My profuse apologies for that. I will make sure that that does not happen again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you,
day.
Professor. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.